Welcome to the deep dive. And before we even really get into the analysis today, we just want to start by extending a really warm divine blessing over your day and over your entire week ahead.
Absolutely.
Whatever you've got on your plate right now, whatever challenges you are facing as you listen to this, we really hope your week is filled with abundant grace, peace, and just a profound sense of purpose.
Yeah, that sense of overarching purpose is, it's actually exactly what we are unpacking today.
It really is.
Because we are looking way past the basic, Sunday school version of Genesis chapter 45.
Right, the flannel graph version we all remember.
Exactly. We're using the really extensive study notes from the Holman and the Nova Almeida Actualizada Study Bibles, the NAA notes.
Yeah.
And the mission here is to uncover the historical, the political, and the deep psychological layers of what is honestly the most famous family reunion in ancient literature.
It's just a completely mind-blowing narrative when you actually look at it closely. It provides these incredible aha moments about ancient Egyptian protocols, human trauma, and, like you said, divine providence.
Yeah, the layers beneath this text, they transform it from a simple story of forgiveness into this highly complex geopolitical event.
So let's set the stage here.
Let's do it.
Joseph is serving as the second most powerful man in Egypt.
Right.
He's effectively running the empire through a completely devastating famine.
Right.
And his brothers, the exact same men who betrayed him and sold him into slavery decades earlier, they're standing right in front of him, begging for grain.
And they have absolutely no idea.
None. They have no idea they are talking to the brother they threw into a pit.
It's wild.
It is. And following this really impassioned, self-sacrificial speech by his brother Judah, the tension in the room just snaps. It reaches a breaking point. Joseph can't hold it back anymore.
No, he really can't.
He orders every single Egyptian official out of the chamber. He clears the room until it's just him and the men who sold him.
And that decision right there, clearing the room, that is the first major indicator of just how heavy this moment is.
Right.
The Holman study notes really highlight this. They point out that this wasn't just Joseph needing a quick private moment to compose himself.
Right, it's bigger than that.
Way bigger.
Right.
He was actively stepping out of his role and committing this massive breach of Egyptian royal protocol.
Because he's the vizier.
Exactly. As the vizier of Egypt, his public persona was tied directly to the stability and the divine order of the state. He represented the absolute pinnacle of Egyptian authority to these foreign shepherds.
Yeah, he had to maintain that image.
And to break down, weeping uncontrollably, so loudly that the text literally notes the Pharaoh's household could hear it through the walls that shattered that stoic, highly formal facade completely.
The cultural whiplash in that room must have been staggering for the brothers.
Oh, without a doubt.
He dismisses his royal retinue. He drops the translator he had been using to fake ignorance of their language. And he just speaks directly to them in their native Hebrew. He says, "I am Joseph."
Just like that.
Just like that. And the study sources really emphasize the specific terminology used to describe the brothers' reaction here.
Yeah, the Portuguese NAA notes use a great word for this.
Right, they say the brothers were pasmados. They aren't just startled or surprised, they are utterly dumbfounded, paralyzed.
That's a terror.
Exactly, a terror so profound they cannot even form words to answer him.
Well, and you have to consider the legal and cultural reality they were suddenly thrust into in that exact second.
Right, think about who they are looking at.
They are standing before a man who possesses the unilateral power of life and death over them. The Grand Vizier could issue an execution order with a single gesture.
Just a nod of his head and it's over.
Exactly. So in their minds, they are suddenly staring at the ultimate vengeance. Culturally and legally, a death sentence for what they did to him would be entirely justified.
It would be expected.
Totally expected. Their paralysis is just sheer, unadulterated terror. They are men waiting for the executioner's axe to fall.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this is where the story pivots so hard.
It really does.
Because they are bracing for the execution order.
Yeah.
Yet, Joseph bypasses revenge entirely. He introduces this radical theological concept instead.
Yeah, he doesn't crush them.
No.
No.
Instead of leveraging his absolute power or even just throwing them in a prison cell to let them sweat it out for a few years, he completely reframes the narrative of their shared trauma.
Right.
He tells them not to be distressed or angry with themselves.
Which brings us to the theological core of the entire chapter.
Yeah.
If you look closely at verses 5 through 8, the Holman notes point out that this passage stands as one of the most eloquent statements about divine sovereignty in human events anywhere in antiquity.
It's incredible.
Joseph explicitly tells them, God sent me before you to preserve life.
God sent me.
Right. He is removing the crushing weight of their immediate guilt by zooming way out. He acknowledges what they did, sure, but he subordinates their malicious intent to a much larger divine architecture.
He's saying you meant it for evil, but God was doing something else entirely.
Exactly. He recognizes that his decades of suffering the pit, the slavery, the false imprisonment, all of it was the precise mechanism used to position him to save the region from starvation.
It's just a masterclass in reframing. He takes the authorship of his life's trajectory away from his brothers and hands it directly to God.
And to really solidify his ability to protect them in this new reality, he uses a very specific phrase.
Yes, the father to Pharaoh line.
Right. He tells his brothers that God has made him a father to Pharaoh.
Now, our sources from the NAA notes clarify the historical context of that phrase because it sounds a bit weird to our modern ears.
Yeah, he wasn't adopting the king of Egypt.
Right. The notes clarify that this was a formal, highly specific Egyptian governmental title.
It designated a high-level counselor, a grand vizier, or a regent, someone who possessed sweeping, almost unlimited authority over the land. He was acting as the pharaoh's most trusted confidant.
So he's not just bragging.
No, not at all. By invoking this specific administrative title, Joseph is assuring his terrified brothers that his power isn't just some temporary stroke of luck.
Right.
He has the vast institutional weight of the Egyptian empire behind him. He has the logistical and political authority to guarantee their absolute safety.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though.
Okay.
The strategic genius of this whole situation becomes even more apparent with his next administrative move. He doesn't just forgive them and send them back to Canaan with some grain.
Right. He initiates a massive relocation effort.
Exactly. He commands them to bring their father, their families, their flocks, everyone to Egypt. And crucially, he dictates exactly where they're going to live.
The land of Goshen.
The land of Goshen.
The selection of Goshen is a total masterstroke of geopolitical and sociological planning.
Let's get into the geography of that.
Geographically, Goshen was located in the eastern delta of the Nile River. It's an area known historically as the Wadi Tumilat.
Okay.
It was exceptionally fertile land, perfectly suited for grazing livestock, which met the immediate survival needs of Jacob's family since they were herdsmen.
But the grass wasn't the only reason he put them there.
Not at all. The agricultural benefits were just part of the equation.
The sociological strategy is where the true genius lies. Our study sources reveal this really deep cultural friction that existed between the Egyptians and nomadic herdsmen.
Yeah, it was a major cultural divide.
Ancient Egyptian society was heavily agricultural and entrenched in its own religious systems.
Yeah.
They viewed foreign shepherds as an abomination. That's the word used. An abomination.
They absolutely detested them.
So by placing his family out in the eastern edge of the delta, Joseph was intentionally creating a cultural buffer zone.
He was establishing a cultural incubator. The NAA notes talk about this. By segregating them geographically, he prevented the Israelites from being absorbed into the dominant Egyptian culture over the coming years.
Because if they lived in the capital,
Right. If they had been settled near the capital or integrated into the main cities, their distinct cultural and religious identity would have just been swallowed up by the Egyptian superpower within a single generation.
they would have just become Egyptians.
Exactly. Goshen allowed them to survive the famine while remaining a distinct, cohesive people.
And this detail aligns perfectly with outside historical records. The administrative practice of settling foreign herdsmen in that exact region is backed up by actual ancient Egyptian texts.
This is one of my favorite details. The Papyrus Anastasi VI.
Yes.
It's an artifact dating back to the reign of Pharaoh Merneptah around 1220 BC, and it provides just incredible corroboration for this.
What does the papyrus actually say?
It explicitly records the Egyptian government granting permission to Edomite nomads to cross the border and settle in the region of Goshen so they could keep their livestock alive during a drought.
Wow.
Yeah. So this artifact grounds the biblical narrative right in the documented administrative policies of the ancient Egyptian state.
It proves that the government actually had a historical precedent for doing exactly this, taking foreign shepherds, despite the cultural disdain for them, and placing them in the Wadi Tumilat region as a matter of border policy.
It demonstrates that Joseph was utilizing established statecraft to execute this divine rescue mission.
But of course, Joseph still answers to Pharaoh. You might expect the ruler of Egypt to be highly suspicious of a sudden influx of foreign nomads asking for prime real estate.
Right.
Yet when word reaches the palace that Joseph's family has arrived, Pharaoh's reaction is just overwhelmingly positive. He essentially hands Joseph a royal blank check.
He really does. Pharaoh issues a direct command. He tells the brothers not even to worry about bringing their belongings from Canaan because, quote, the best of the land of Egypt will be given to them.
The best of the land.
He goes so far as to provide Egyptian carts from the royal stores to help move their women and children.
Which is huge.
It is staggering generosity, and it is entirely driven by the immense value Pharaoh places on Joseph's administration.
So, as the brothers prepare for this long journey back to Canaan to get their father, Joseph loads them up with provisions and gifts.
Right.
And it is right here that the linguistic and numerical details in the text reveal a really profound narrative irony.
Yeah, the contrast in the gifts.
He gives all of his brothers changes of clothes for the journey. But to Benjamin, his youngest brother, his only full brother Joseph, gives 5 changes of clothes and 300 pieces of silver.
300 pieces of silver.
Yeah.
The NAA notes draw a direct, unavoidable parallel between this specific gift and the original betrayal.
It's hard to miss once you see it.
Right. Because decades earlier, these exact same older brothers sold Joseph to a caravan of Midianite traders. And the price for his life, the cost of his freedom, was a mere 20 pieces of silver.
20 pieces of silver for a lifetime of slavery.
Yeah.
Contracted with 300 pieces of silver just given away casually as a parting gift.
It is an astronomical inflation of grace.
The bitter irony of that contrast would not have been lost on the older brothers. Not at all.
No, they would have felt that instantly. It's the striking visual and economic representation of how completely the power dynamic has shifted.
The brother they sold for 20 pieces is now dispensing wealth on a scale they can barely comprehend.
Pouring out unmerited favor instead of the retribution they actually earned.
And as they leave, carrying all this unimaginable wealth and the really heavy truth of what they have to confess when they get home, Joseph leaves them with one final, very specific instruction.
He says, do not quarrel on the way.
Don't quarrel on the way. Our sources point out that this is not just a throwaway line of sibling advice. It's a fundamental turning point.
Well, think about the psychological weight of that walk back to Canaan.
It must have been immense.
These men have to travel together for weeks, knowing that at the end of the road, they have to look their elderly father in the eye and admit that they've been lying to his face for over 20 years.
Right.
They have to confess that a wild animal didn't kill Joseph. They did. Or at least they tried to.
The temptation to turn on each other during that walk, to deflect blame, to argue over whose idea the betrayal originally was, it would have been suffocating.
Exactly. So by explicitly commanding them not to quarrel, the NAA notes suggest Joseph is establishing the parameters for their new reality.
He's setting the rules.
Yes, he has forgiven them, but now they have to navigate the much harder task of forgiving each other.
That's a great point.
The narrator includes this detail to show the beginning of a massive transition. This deeply dysfunctional, violently jealous family is being forced to unify.
The preservation of life isn't just about surviving a famine.
No, it is about the transformation of a fractured family into a unified people.
Which brings us to the agonizing final scene of the chapter.
Oh, man.
Back in Canaan. The brothers complete the journey. They walk into the tent of their father Jacob, a man who has been shrouded in this heavy, suffocating blanket of grief for 2 decades.
2 decades of mourning.
And they deliver the impossible news. They say, Joseph is still alive, and he's ruler over all the land of Egypt.
And Jacob's reaction here is the psychological realism of it is just profound.
It really is. What happens?
The study notes describe his immediate physical and emotional response with a phrase that translates to his heart fainting or going completely numb.
No.
He doesn't rejoice. He doesn't start leaping with joy. His brain simply shuts down.
It's too much.
The cognitive dissonance of hearing that his dead son is not only alive, but acting as the supreme ruler of a foreign superpower, he just can't process it.
It is the trauma of sudden good news.
Yes.
When you have lived with a specific grief for 20 years, it becomes part of your identity. To have that reality violently upended, even by a miracle, induces this state of emotional paralysis.
He simply does not believe them. He thinks it's a cruel, incomprehensible lie.
Because his sons have already proven themselves untrustworthy.
Right. Their words are not enough to break through the decades of numbness.
So what finally shatters the disbelief, it isn't their testimony.
No.
It's the physical, tangible evidence sent from the Nile.
The cart?
The carts. The text specifically notes that it is the sight of the Egyptian carts that finally revives Jacob's spirit.
And the presence of those carts cannot be overstated here.
Right, let's talk about what these carts actually represented in the ancient world.
In the ancient Near East, an Egyptian royal cart was not just some simple wooden wagon that a local carpenter threw together.
Whoa.
These were highly advanced, incredibly expensive pieces of technology. They used rare materials and specialized engineering from the empire's military and royal sectors.
So seeing them in Canaan?
To see a caravan of royal Egyptian transport vehicles pull up to a nomadic encampment in Canaan would be jarring.
Right.
It would be the modern equivalent of a fleet of heavily armored foreign presidential motorcades suddenly appearing on a dirt road.
That paints a perfect picture.
Yeah.
Jacob looks at those carts and he instantly knows his sons do not possess the wealth, the influence, or the technological capability to acquire them.
Exactly. The only person who could command the royal stores of Egypt to be sent across international borders is someone with the exact authority his sons are describing.
The visual proof overrides his psychological numbness.
It breaks right through.
The reality of the miracle floods in. And his spirit, which the text basically implies had been dead since the day he was handed Joseph's bloody tunic, is completely revived.
He moves from absolute disbelief to this definitive declaration. He says, "It is enough. My son Joseph is still alive. I will go and see him before I die."
It is the perfect emotional resolution to the immediate crisis.
It really bridges the agonizing pain of his past with the promise of future preservation in Goshen. The entire chapter functions as this intricate tapestry of human failing being caught and repurposed by divine intent.
When we synthesize all of these sources, the historical records of Egyptian border policy, the linguistic analysis of the vizier's titles, the psychological reality of trauma and grace, this chapter serves as an absolute masterclass in the necessity of zooming out.
Zooming out is the perfect way to put it.
It challenges our inherent human tendency to view our lives in an extreme, myopic close-up.
Because when you are in the middle of the narrative, when you are the one in the pit, or locked in the foreign prison, or dealing with the profound betrayal of the people closest to you, it feels like the story has ended in senseless tragedy.
It feels permanent.
Right. But Joseph's ability to stand before his abusers and declare that a sovereign architecture was at work the entire time, that demonstrates the transformative, healing power of perspective.
It is the recognition that the narrative being written is infinitely larger than our immediate pain.
Yes.
The isolation in the Wadi Tamalat wasn't just an exile from the Egyptian capital, it was the preservation of a people.
Right.
The silver handed to Benjamin wasn't just a painful reminder of a past crime. It became a tangible symbol of overwhelming unmerited grace.
The very things that seem explicitly designed to destroy us can, over time, be the precise instruments utilized to deliver us.
That is so powerful, but reaching that conclusion requires a tremendous amount of patience.
Oh, absolutely. It demands a willingness to trust in a larger pattern that we often cannot perceive until years or even decades have passed.
Until the full scope of the architecture is finally revealed.
Right.
Which leaves us with a provocative thought for you to carry with you as you go about your week.
Yeah.
We want you to deeply consider the mechanics of this story. If Joseph's horrific betrayal, being literally sold into slavery by his own flesh and blood, was actually the exact specific mechanism required to save his entire family from total starvation decades later, how might time and a radical shift in perspective eventually change the way you view the deepest setbacks or betrayals in your own life?
That is such a profound question to explore.
Is it possible that the thing you currently view as your greatest tragedy is actually quietly laying the unseen groundwork for your future preservation?
It really reframes how we process our own moments of being in the pit.
It entirely changes the lens through which we view our own history. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Genesis 45.
It's been a great conversation.
We really hope this analysis eliminated the text and brought the ancient world into vivid focus for you. As we close out today's deep dive, we want to leave you with this final essential thought. God blesses all the listeners. Take care, and we will see you on the next deep dive.